Hello everyone, my name is Neeraj, and in this video we are going to see how to use live method from jQuery. Before I get started, I would highly recommend you to go and check out my previous video on jQuery events. In order to truly understand how jQuery Live works, we need to have the fundamental understanding of how events bubble. And this video discusses how events bubble, and at the end of the video there is a practical example of building something which makes use of event bubbling, and that further ensures that you fully understand event bubbling. So once again, I highly recommend you watch that video if you haven't. Here is a quick recap of what event bubbling is. When you click on a link on a browser, then an event object is created, and that event object travels upwards, and it keeps traveling until it hits root node called document. So that's what's called event bubbling. Now let's take an example. Here we have a table which has 5 links, and I'm binding all the links with a click event, and I'm saying that display that alert the text and then return false. I'm clicking on run here, and then if I click on Google, I see the message Google, and then I'm not taken to the Google page. That's because I'm returning false. So this works okay. Now think of a scenario where I have a need to add the record dynamically. When I say dynamically, it means that that HTML fragment, that HTML markup was not there in the original HTML page. For example, in this case we have these records, the last one being Apple. But what if, let's say, dynamically we add one more record, and then if we click on the link, what happens? So first let me add a record dynamically. Here I have copied 2 lines of JavaScript code which dynamically adds the record for company Intel. Don't worry too much about the code, because this would be covered in jQuery DOM manipulation video. So here I am inserting a record for Intel at the end of the table. So let me go and hit run, and indeed I see the record for Intel. So the record has been inserted. However, there will be one difference. If I click on Google, I get the message Google, and then I'm not taken to the Google page. That is because here I have bound the Google link to this function. However, if I click on Intel, then I'm taken to the Intel page, and I did not get the alert message. Why is that? That is because for Google and Microsoft and other HTML links, here I'm doing a binding. I'm adding an event handler which will react when we click on the link. But bind works only on the elements which are already present. So at the time this code is executed, there is no Intel. Intel is added afterwards. So Intel does not have the event handler. In graphical representation, it would look like this. Anytime we add an event handler, I'm indicating it like this. So what's happening is that at the beginning of the page for Google and Apple, there is an event handler for a element. But since Intel record was added dynamically for Intel, for a element, there is no event handler. So what happens is that when I click on Google, then that click event is intercepted by the event handler, and then we see the message. But when we click on Intel, then there is no event handler and we do not get the alert message. So now how do we solve this problem? How do we attach an event handler to Intel record? Well, we can attach a record by performing the same operation, by binding to the Intel link this function. And here is the code for that. So this code remains same. After inserting the record, I am selecting the Intel link, and to that link I'm binding a click event and I'm passing the same function. So let's try it out. Click on run. Now I click on Intel link and I get Intel message. So this solution worked. However, look at the code. Here we are calling the same function. That function is being called here. We can extract the code into a single function, and in this way we will have only single line of repetition, but still there will be a repetition. We always need to remember after inserting a record dynamically that we need to do some bindings. This is a very simple page. It's a very simple functionality here, but in a large web application it becomes difficult to bind the event handlers to dynamically created records. These days a lot of applications have Ajax, and through Ajax, when you make a request, when you get the response and you attach that response to the HTML page, then you need to call all those bindings so that they continue to behave the way they should be behaving. And this becomes a problem. The live method of jQuery tries to solve this problem. How does it solve the problem? We'll look into it later. First, let's see how to refactor this piece of code using live so that we continue to get the behavior we want. Here is the refactored code. First thing you will notice is that after inserting the Intel record, we are not doing any further processing. Next thing to notice is that instead of bind, here we are using live. First, let's click on run. I'm going to click on Google. I see Google. When I click on Intel, I get Intel. So this is good. By using the live, I'm able to get the same behavior for Intel and exactly the same behavior as Google without doing any processing after inserting the record. So how does all this thing is working? Let's look at a graphical representation of this. When we do live, we are attaching an event handler at the document level. So notice that in the previous case, I said that when you do bind, then we were attaching the event handler at A element. But when we use live, there is no event handler for A. All the event handlers are bound to document. So when we click on Google, what happens is that an event object is created, and that event object keeps propagating upwards until it reaches document node. And there, this event handler intercepts that event and the function is called. When we click on Intel, exactly the same thing happens. Because there is no event handler for A element, so that event object keeps propagating upwards and it reaches the node document where we already have an event handler. So the reason why in the case of live, even if we attach new elements, they continue to work, that is because no event handler is bound to the element itself. All the event handling happens at the document level. So as long as the event can propagate to the document, then things will work fine. So one thing to notice here is that, let's say that you click on a link and the event is propagating towards the document. However, in between someone calls stop propagation. What that will do is that it will intercept the event, and event will not be able to reach the document node, and in that case live will not work. Let's take a look at one more example. In this example, I'm doing table, then find all the children, then find a link, and then bind the click. So if I click on Google here, I will get Google. If I click on Oracle, I'll get Oracle. So this works fine. But if I do live here, it will not work. So this is something you need to be careful about. Live will not work here, because live does not work when you change the selectors. In order for live to work, the selectors should not be changed, and live should be called on the very first selector element result. I'm going to click on Google now, and I'm taken to the Google page. So this is something about live you need to be careful about. I demonstrated a few deficiencies of live method. The first one being that you cannot chain, and the second one being that you need to ensure that no one calls stop propagation, so that the event object can propagate towards the document. But barring these two conditions, live works very well, and it is a really handy tool. I encourage you to go check out the live documentation on jQuery documentation page. Also, you can click on the download material for this video, and that will bring you to jsfiddle.page, and here you can experiment more. That's the end of this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any feedback, send it to me.